Hello, my name's Caryn Onions and I'm from the Mulberry Bush, and I'm going to tell you about some research that we've done and how we're trying to put the research findings into practice. So I'll start off just giving you a little bit of information about me. I started off years ago as a social worker in children and families work. I liked working individually with children, so I did a child and adolescent psychotherapy training, and I worked in CAMS for 10 years. Then in 2004, I joined the Mulberry Bush School, and I was the lead clinician until 2017, which meant that my work was having clinical oversight of the children and also working a lot with the staff about thinking about how they work with the children. And then I did my own research, and the school had also done some other research. And then in 2017, I left the clinical role and became the research lead. So what is the Mulberry Bush School? So we're a school in Oxfordshire, a non-maintained special school with children's home. We have primary age children, so 5 to 13. Don't generally have many 5-year-olds, but 6 and 7, a bit more frequent. We offer children 38 and 52-week placements, and its education is on site, and the children live on site. Most of the children have experienced pretty early years trauma and neglect, and they are coming to us because the majority, or 2/3, are coming from a foster placement breakdown, and the rest are from an adoptive placement breakdown or from some birth families. And the common feature is that family life is breaking down, and education, they're not being educated, they're not learning. So the school, over the years, starting in 2004, the school's done a number of pieces of research, and I'm going to talk to you today about one of those. I'm not going to go into any of these because I've got quite a lot to say. So the piece of research that I want to talk to you about is a quantitative study that we started in 2008, and our collaborators were the Institute of Education at UCL in London. And for the first year we piloted it, and then we data gathered between 2009 and 2015. It was the staff in the school that were doing the data gathering. And the kinds of data that we looked at was academic data, the Boxall profile for social and emotional stuff. We looked at physical interventions and child aggression levels and antisocial behaviour. And we also looked at the story STEM assessment, which I'll tell you about in a minute. So the findings were good. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we had good reductions in aggression and antisocial behaviour. We had good academic outcomes for children in all of the areas, and these were statistically significant. The Boxall profile was good. So the factors that meant that children were learning better, supporting their development in class, went up, and the factors that were sort of getting in the way of their learning went down. But in terms of the children's story stems, this is an assessment that we do on all children, and this really looks at issues to do with children's attachment style. This didn't look as if the children were improving in that area, and in fact, it was all a bit of a puzzle, and we couldn't really work it out. And in some areas, it looks as if children were getting worse, and we didn't really understand the findings. And so it was quite a puzzle to us. So we then decided, what are we going to do about this negative looking finding, or interesting finding, you could say. So I'll just tell you a little bit about this assessment, the narrative story STEM assessment. It's an assessment for, the one that we use is for primary age children, and it's a play-based assessment. And the STEM in the story is the beginning of the story, and the interviewer, you tell a child a little story, you use props, so you use little Playmobil people and doll's house furniture, bits and pieces like that, and you tell them the beginning of the story, or a STEM. And when you've told them so much of the story, you say, now can you show me and tell me what happens next? And these are videoed, and so you can look at the way in which, and there's a number of these stories, 10 stories in total that we use at the school, and you code the children's responses to the stories, and it gives you a figure which helps you work out aspects to do with the child's attachment style and other things. So as an organisation, we do this as an assessment on all new children when they arrive, and then we did them 2 years later. And we decided that we were going to ask an external reviewer, so an independent researcher, to recode the videos for us. And so we had a pool of 50 children who had done 2 of these videos, time 1 and time 2. So this researcher had 100 videos to look at, and his assessment was slightly different to the assessment that we had done in the school. And we were quite pleased about that, because we thought it'd be good to have somebody outside of the organisation looking at the videos in a slightly different way. And his assessment also looked at the coherence of children's play and how that changed over time, whether you could see themes of loss and trauma in the children's play and how they changed over time, and also how the relationship that the child had with the interviewer changed. So the person who did this recoding, this mammoth task for us, was Dr. Steve Farnfield at the University of Roehampton. The school had had a little bit of contact with him in the past, and I'd known about him. His own PhD had been using story stems, and we thought he would be a good person. He had a background in social work and residential work, so he understood the population of children. So that was one part of the data set that he had. He also had the demographic data of all of the 50 children. So when children arrive in the school and throughout their time with us, we collate data on the children, so their own their diagnoses that they have, the number of placements that they've had, have they had any therapy, what extra support have they had. We also try and get as much data as we can on birth family, although that's a bit more difficult to get, but that's the kind of information that we want. So we want to be able to try and develop a profile of the child, a nice sort of profile of their experiences in life before they come to the school. You know, what's their experiences been like. This was a time-consuming process, you can imagine. So watching and recoding 50 children's videos, so 100 videos, took a long time. He started in 2017, and we got the findings in 2019. So it's a long project. So what were the findings? Well, there was no statistically significant change in the children's attachment style, which actually, on the face of it, you think, oh, that's a shame, isn't it? But actually, given the loads of attachment research that there is, that's not unsurprising, and it fits with other attachment studies. However, there were many that he thought were in the foothills of reorganising towards something more secure. He thought that our population of children was an extremely distressed population of children. But when you looked at the data in a little bit more detail, you could see that 44% of the children showed a significant improvement in trauma reduction, in play quality and play coherence, and in their attachment style. But however, 28% didn't show any changes. They didn't show any improvement or no deterioration. They were just sort of static in these particular areas. But 28%, worryingly, showed a deterioration. And that sort of matched up and married up with the findings that we had originally found in the IOE study. So we thought, well, let's look at these 3 groups of children and what do the demographic data tell us about these children? And we ended up with 3 sort of distinct cohorts of children. So for the children for whom there was a reduction in trauma over 2 years, and where their play and coherence got better, and where there was a movement in their attachment style, these children were all associated with being born to a mother who was aged 20 or over, having an attachment disorder diagnosis, having a resolution of trauma and loss over those 2 years, being able to resolve something in the play themes, being more coherent in their play, so it was less all over the place and had a sort of a logical consequence to it. And actually, we saw as well in the data that children on the autistic spectrum were also within this category. So they made progress and shifts, which is an interesting finding in itself and will need more analysis at some point. So this was the group of children, the 44% of children who made good shifts in this area. So then we next looked at the children who were associated with, who made no shifts in these areas. They didn't improve, they didn't get worse, they were static. And the similarity between these children were that they had a diagnosis of depression, either before they arrived at the school or they came to the school with that diagnosis, or whilst they were at the school. And there was a real association with, in their play themes throughout, a theme of loss of family, and then a correlation with their own depression. So there's a group of children for whom they have not come to terms with what's happened to them in their lives. They can't make sense of their life story. This is a group of children who've probably got family members where things are still very up in the air and in a very precarious situation. So the children in this group were children whose parents were in prison, and they were going and visiting their parents in prison. There were children for whom trauma was still ongoing, really, in relation to their family. Children where there'd been a complicated death of a close relative, like murder or suicide. So that's this group of children where they're a bit static and stuck. And then there's the group of children for whom there was a deterioration in these areas, where they didn't make shifts. And associated with this group, they were born to mums who were aged 19 or less, some of them quite a lot younger, so really young mums, some of them. These were mums who had substance misuse during the child's first year of life. So who knows whether they had in pregnancy or not? We don't really have that level of data. And also parents with parental mental illness in the first year of life. So the sort of profile of these children is they're going to be an experience, very early days of neglect, possibly abuse. And in this group of children is also children who have either been diagnosed with or on the way to being diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. So they're children with real cognitive difficulties and have had very little positive experiences in life, right from the beginning. So we've ended up with these three sort of cohorts of children. So, what are we going to do with this? What are the practical implications for the staff, and how we work with the children? So there's something for us about really thinking very seriously about the impact of the loss of family on these children and trying to make it more explicit and more central in all areas of our work in the school. There's something for us about thinking about the children who've had a diagnosis of depression and how this might affect the work that we do and how we carry out the work with these children. There's a practice issue about talking with parents and carers and referrers about the ongoing effects of trauma and what the timescale for change is, and really getting a really good profile of the child when they come in and explaining to referrers, parents and carers about what we've seen in the past and what we imagine the trajectory for the child to be. And there's more work for us to do about thinking about repetitive themes of children's play and that we can understand that better. So where are we now? Well, I've co-written a document which looks at from practice to research. I've co-written it with a number of staff and hoping to implement some of the changes the key findings that I've just talked about. I'm doing some publishing and some writing with the researcher, and we've got quite a few ideas that we could do. There's further data analysis to be done. And I think there is a conversation and a link to be had with organisations that work with young women who substance misuse in pregnancy. Anyway, that's my presentation for today, and I look forward to the Q&A in August. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.